All right, episode 2.
7 weeks in the making.
7 weeks. Yeah, we're releasing an episode once every 7 weeks at this rate. But that's okay.
Consistency is key, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. This needs to be authentic, and we need to we need to do these when we're able to and when it feels right to. But we'll get some consistency with it.
Exactly.
I'm sure. But no, today we wanted to talk about Adolescence, which whoever's listening probably knows about it. And so it's probably not worth going into too much detail about what it is and what the storyline is, but essentially it's a Netflix drama that's been released where, and emphasis on drama, not a docu-series or anything. It is a dramatized series. So about a 13-year-old boy who ends up killing a young girl in his school, and it's positioned in a way that he's done this due to kind of incel behaviour and a series of events that have led up to the decision that he made. So yeah, it's triggered a lot of discussion amongst, I guess, lots of different areas really, but predominantly the kind of feminist masculinity areas of conversation. You've watched it and I've watched it. So what were your thoughts, initial thoughts?
So I think it's a good show to like show the effects of, well, the after effects of a violent crime. But that's kind of it. And it is good dramatization. You know, I really like Stephen Graham as an actor as well. He's really good. He's in Time, which has got Sean Bean in it. He's like this prison guard. That's really good. He's in another one called
Stephen
Responder.
Graham, is he
He's
sorry,
the dad.
is he the dad? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I really like him. He's pretty good. I think he also co-wrote the show as well. But it's a good watch. It actually is. Except for like it's more so the aftermath, which I've got an issue with. But we don't need to go into that just yet, I suppose. But yeah, it is a good show. It's cleverly kind of shot in like each one's like one scene, isn't it? Each episode.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. But I'm not a cinematographer, so I'm not really speaking any detail on that. But I really enjoyed watching it. It kind of annoyed me in various parts because you could tell like they were trying to scapegoat in certain ways, and it felt quite close to propaganda to me. But if you can get past that, it's quite good.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit, because just in case I've done a poor job of explaining what the kind of series was about, I guess, yeah, my question would be, if the producers of the show were acting in good faith and we're assuming that, and they had good intentions, what do you think they were trying to, what message do you think they were trying to put across by putting this show together from their perspective?
Are we giving them the benefit of the doubt?
Yeah, as if
Okay.
what they were trying to do was to act in good faith and to have the positive outcome that I think they hoped it would have. But then I know that you have different thoughts on that.
So I think they were trying to highlight the dangers of online radicalization, I think. But at the same time, why would you use a 13-year-old as an incel? Like, of course, I mean, he's 13. Of course, he's not having sex. Just a bit weird. Okay. So I thought that was quite an odd decision. But again, give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that is what they're trying to do. And it's like they've seen the rise of the new bogeyman, which is Andrew Tate, and the manosphere, which again, quite a loose term, which incorporates many different people, many different groups of people. But it's like like I say, it's a new bogeyman, isn't it? So, yeah,
could you explain what incel behavior is, just for anybody that doesn't know, and kind of how that's showing up in society today? Just some examples that we might like.
So an incel is someone who's involuntary celibate. So some of the stuff which the show kind of highlights is that they believe that 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men, which is actually data from OkCupid. I think it was something along the lines of 80% of females in this cohort they did the study on found only 20% of men to be above average attractiveness, but it kind of distorts reality in a way, because attraction is not just physical, and people don't just get partners by, especially if you're male, this sort of stuff, by looking good. It reduces, like, sense of humor, status, all the rest of that stuff. So you don't have any of that. So part of their ideology, if you like, is that it's called black pill, I think. So there's no point trying, because you're just not in the top 20%, so you might as well just drop out. So they believe, the writers of the show, they believe that this sort of thing brings rise to misogyny, which there's probably some truth in that, to be fair. Because if you're resentful of these women who you want sex from, but they won't give it to you, you are going to be a little bit misogynistic. And I remember this thing, actually. This was a Jordan Peterson thing again. He said something along the lines of, one of the reasons why successful societies are monogamous is because there are more, sounds so crass, but there are more women to go around. So you wouldn't just have like one man sleeping with like 20 women. You'd have 20 men sleeping with 20 women. And you wouldn't have this like underclass of men who are just kind of dropped out of society. They don't have any prospects of having a family or having a wife. So then they just kind of, in this instance, they've formed their own communities, which is incels. But they are autistic people are overrepresented in the incel. I don't want to say community, but in incels, they're like 30%, I think, something like that. Whereas in rest of society, it's 1 or 2% of boys are autistic. So they're hugely overrepresented there. I think it also paints incels as a danger to women, where actually they're more of a danger to themselves. They're much more likely to kill themselves or harm themselves than they are to harm somebody else. So it kind of misses that point as well, I think. But then if you're also trying to, I don't think that we're trying to do this, but then if you're looking at knife crime in this country, it's not 13-year-old white working class boys doing it.
Yeah. For clarity, I think I guess the data shows that is people of color who are committing those crimes predominantly. I don't know what the stats are, but I know that was a lot of the kind of backlash of the show, that it wasn't depicting that accurately.
Yeah, which to defend the show, I don't actually think that's what they were trying to portray. But most knife crime in this country is gang related, I think.
And that incel behavior as well, like, because I don't feel like I really saw that incel kind of community aspect showing up in the show, because my understanding was that the reasons that he kind of made the decisions that he did was because the girl, I forgot her name, Katie, that's it. That does bring up another point that I've thought about as well. But before I get into that, she was kind of posting things online, I think, about him being undesirable and all these other things. And children at school were liking it and sharing it and all this sort of stuff. So I didn't really see in the show where that incel behavior was, or like community that he had involved himself with. I didn't see where that showed up, to be honest.
The only time that was really touched upon was one of the episodes with the interview with the psychologist, where she was asking these weird questions about, do you have any friends who are girls? Does your dad have any friends who are girls? And it was like that sort of like line of questioning, and like, hey, have you Have you been intimate with a girl? It's like, I don't know. It felt almost irrelevant. I don't know why you're asking if he's got friends who are girls. But to your first point was, he seems more of a victim of the incel stuff because he's being bullied by being called an incel. Like, they're using these different emojis to bully him online, basically. That's not to say he's a victim in all of this, obviously. And we're getting carried away because it's a drama. It's not a documentary.
This is it. This is what we have to remind ourselves of. Which I guess it's. I've got two kind of interesting things that come to mind where when I couldn't think of the girl's name, Katie's name, that he ended up taking her life. I found myself, like, throughout the show kind of siding with him a lot of the time, and I was thinking to myself, I wasn't quite sure how I felt about that because obviously he'd murdered this girl, so it's like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way, but I was trying to understand why it was. I think one, there's like a more technical aspect of it where she just wasn't in the show very long, so you didn't build a relationship with her. You didn't really know what she looked like either, so you kind of didn't build that attachment. So perhaps that was one of the reasons. But also, I think,
what are the things that you know about Katie?
I think she was slightly older than him, a year older. So I think I'm right in saying that. So I guess there's that age difference. I know that she was saying things about him online that weren't very kind.
So basically,
that's about it.
You don't even know what she looks like. You know her first name, not a second name.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she bullied him, and that's basically it. So how do you relate to someone in any way, really, let alone a positive way, if that's all you know about them?
Exactly.
Except for the fact that she is a victim of something, which in itself is quite interesting, given that there's like this elevated victims are given elevated status. Now she's a victim, an actual victim of a real inverted commas crime.
Yeah.
Whereas people maneuver themselves to be in the status of victim because weirdly it gives them status. So maybe I wonder if that's got an aspect of, and if that's an aspect of why it's so big, because the identity of being a victim gives people status.
This is a really good point. And also at the beginning of the show as well, I think the reasons that I've kind of felt, I guess, a sense of compassion for him is the opening scene is the door being broken down in his family home. You've got his mum, his dad, his slightly older sister. And they batter down his door as well. And he's there in his bed, just like, I mean, the acting is amazing, but he's just so fearful. I think they say he like wets his pants as well. And it's just like, fuck,
that's
it's such like a,
and that's the first time you see him.
So he's just a little boy then.
A
little 13-year-old boy who is scared shitless by the police knocking down their door. And it's like you're gonna feel that way towards him. But I don't know how you felt at that point.
I almost didn't, even though like it's a foregone conclusion basically from the get-go that he did it, but I always held on to this hope that it wasn't actually him. And I remember watching this show called The Fall. I fucking love this show. It was so good. And it's about this guy who's a grief counselor who is also, he's like quite reserved and like shy and seems like a really good person, or a nice person maybe, but I really related to him. But at the same time, he would break into women's houses, steal some of their underwear, leave some sort of clue or calling card, if you like, that he's been there, and then the next day or 2 days later, he'd go back and he'd strangle them to death. And then he'd clean the body and he'd pose it. It was really, really bizarre, because he's do this to these people, but then he's really, really respectful of the corpse. It's strange. And he wouldn't do anything sexual. He would just kill them and then pose them in some sort of, I don't know, some way, and then take some photos and then go. And that was it. And he was just this guy who had 2 daughters, he was married, and he was a grief counselor. And it was really weird. He was a really relatable character, but also evil. And I kind of had a similar sort of feeling for Jamie.
Do you think that's...
Go on.
Sorry. Is what you're saying there, is it that, because I think I felt the same way, you saw so many of his character traits in yourself and so many of his experiences, perhaps maybe at school, where, you know, you're being called names or whatever, and you can draw all of those parallels. And the only thing that's different between you and him at that point is Jamie, for example, has ended up murdering somebody.
Yeah.
Take that away, and he is this person that you can, this young boy that you can probably relate to in so many ways. And in the same way, the program like The Fall that you were saying about, take away him like strangling these women and weird pictures and all that sort of stuff. He's just a father with children and a family.
Yeah. And the way he was, like, he just seemed to have like kind of like a sense of like low self-esteem, that sort of thing, and just would carry himself in a that sort of way. I could really relate to that, so I was kind of on his side. And the same again with Jamie. I remember asking some girl out in school, she's just like literally laughed in my face, and I was like, oh. But I never once crossed my mind to go home, get a knife, and stab her for it. So from that perspective as well, it's just like, really, is that the motive you're going with? It seems a bit far-fetched.
Right, exactly. And I think this is kind of where people have had most of the issue around the show, is that, I guess this is the way I've seen it, is that it almost seems so unrealistic. You've got this boy who has, like, all in all, probably like a good home life, really, pretty solid parents. The dad seems like a good role model. He has some anger issues, but you can see throughout the show that he's not letting that get away from him, other than the points that he kind of has those outbursts. But even that, I can understand, like the pressure he's under and all that sort of thing.
That'll be something good to talk about in a minute as well.
Yeah, sure, we'll do that. And yeah, so good home environment. He's brought up in an area which doesn't seem too impoverished. He's at school, all these sorts of things, and they portray this narrative where you've got all of that, and then he's gone and murdered somebody based off of the fact that she bullied him. Like that, I think I was listening to a podcast today with Chris Williamson and what's the guy called? That's the one. Yeah. And I think they said this hasn't actually happened before. Like, there's no instances of this happening. So to say that this, to enact this and to then relate it to this problem of incel behavior, toxic masculinity, all this sort of stuff, is so unrealistic and almost unfair to do, because it's not a narrative that's playing out in the world.
Yeah.
And then the issue is to then let that dictate policy, i.e. this being shown in schools, is where I think people are having the issue.
Yeah, it is bizarre to see that Katie, a fictional character who no one even knows what she looks like, is getting more sympathy than actual real victims of like real crime. And if you want to tell like a story about this sort of thing, what about actual things which have happened, like the stabbings in Southport, for example? or there was something similar again in Liverpool, I think. Something happened in Plymouth, which was an incel. But why this? It seems quite strange. And also, you know, it's telling as well that Keir Starmer's said twice now. He's called it a documentary.
Yeah.
Like twice.
Which is an issue because
It's not.
Yeah. It's not, and somebody in his position should be far more careful about the way that they speak than he's being, especially to something like this. That's, you know, the outcomes of it can be so catastrophic, if you like.
Yeah.
But
one of the things which I think the show did do really well, but almost by accident, and it's interesting how it's not actually been highlighted at all anywhere, even by like the Prime Minister and all that stuff, is that it's like a symptom or a sign of like the system like refusing to look in the mirror. So why has this happened? Is it because he's been bullied, or is it because the teachers have not noticed the bullying? And the classrooms are full. The like the parents maybe have missed it because both of them are working, both of them are busy, they're at the house all the time because they need to pay for the mortgage, which they can't afford. It's like all of these different aspects have meant that Jamie's being isolated and on his own and looking at stuff online, blah, 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 and has done this thing. So it's almost like it's externalizing the blame and it's just protecting the systems, whatever, from introspection. It just doesn't have to look at itself if there's a boogeyman. And it's offering like just a simple moralistic story. This bad man, or bad boy rather, hates women and is therefore just going to kill one of them because he can.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with how bad the schools are, nothing to do with how like busy the parents are, even though they're portrayed as good parents.
Yeah, and the way that we're going to deal with this as a government is we're going to put this in front of young children, let them take the emotional toll of however they interpret this or whatever, and then let them deal with like the repercussions of that and try and work that out themselves, as opposed to looking at the systems in place in order to affect it.
And what they're going to do if they show it in schools? Are they just going to watch the show 4 hours and then you're going to talk about Andrew Tate for another 4 hours? And you can, again, Andrew Tate is, you know, he's not an architect of all of this. He didn't build it. He's just another symptom of the problems with it all. You get, what happens when you like repress something, right? The kind of urge, if you like, changes a little bit, morphs and gets stronger. So if you suppress any masculine urge in boys, young men, etc., it's going to find an outlet for it, and it's going to be one you don't like. So it's going to be cars, women, money. That's like a caricature of masculinity. It's kind of what immature boys think masculinity is. And that's what Andrew Tate kind of shows, isn't it? That's what he portrays himself to be. Well, that's what he is, actually. He doesn't portray himself to be that at all. That's what he is.
Yeah.
Womanizer, got money, got cars.
Yeah, and it's a convincing story if that's the only story that's there, which it kind of is at the moment because of the lack of male role models. But I think
you've got to, that's the first thing you're going to see, isn't it? If you go online, that's the first thing. But there's way, there are more and better examples, but that's the first thing you're going to see. You're going to get drawn into it.
Exactly. We'll go more onto like role models and kind of that toxic masculinity area in a minute, I think. But I think we're about to touch on something really interesting just a minute ago when we were talking about kind of the resources that are there to facilitate conversations around this being shown in schools, and that probably lands on like teachers, how and parents.
Mm.
I don't really know if there's any other areas that would need to facilitate those conversations.
It'd be mostly teachers and parents, wouldn't it? I can't think
Yeah.
much of. Yeah, like maybe
And
sports coaches or something like that. But I mean, that's going to be
yeah,
relatively rare.
right. And I guess you would know better than most people, given the area that you're in as a psychologist. But like, are teachers and parents set up? Do they have the like tools in order to facilitate those kind of conversations? Because I know that I had a really kind of like I had like a proper emotional reaction to parts of that show. Emotional reaction. Who the fuck am I? I've actually cried at points in the show and found it really emotional and like was quite taken back by it and was thinking about it a lot. And I could draw various comparisons in my life with people that I've got around me that are that age and how easy it would be to kind of get into these problems and all this sort of thing. And like, yeah, it really affected me and got me thinking about things that I hadn't thought about before, which I guess is a good thing about the show, is that it is allowing kind of it's facilitating all those sorts of thoughts and discussions. But my question to you is, like, do teachers and parents have the tools in order to actually have the right conversations with children about how they might be feeling about it?
There might be some who are adept at it, maybe. I think it'd be rare to find a teacher who would be able to contain all of that. I mean, you're 27, right? I mean, you've had 26. You've had a strong emotional reaction to that. Can you imagine what 13, 14, 15-year-old boys are and girls are going to have? And there's going to be 30 of them in a room, at least.
Mm-hmm.
You know, best case is that an argument breaks out. I don't know. I think it's asking a lot of teachers to be able to contain that amount of energy, I think.
I think the show, ironically, depicted quite well, or like represented quite well, sorry, the state of schools at the moment and how essentially they're under-resourced. I thought it was really interesting as well how they like played out the male and female teachers and role models within the school. Like, I don't know if you noticed or thought the same, but all of the male teachers were very loud. Well, sorry, most of them were very loud. At times, one was being like quite aggressive towards a student. Then you had this other male teacher that was, I think he turned up late or something, and he said, or one of the children said, "Oh, all Mr. Such and Such does is just shows us videos, and like that's how he teaches and all that sort of thing." Which I think again is ironic because that's what government is telling teachers to do with this show. But like, yeah, they kind of represented the male teachers in that way, and then the female teachers were very more composed, I thought, quieter, but then at times also like kind of couldn't handle the, like, they couldn't regulate the emotions of a couple of the characters, especially the friend of Katie. But yeah, I thought that was interesting how they showed the schools. I thought it was quite an accurate representation, probably, other than the fact that I thought there were way too many male teachers in that school, because my understanding is there aren't that many male teachers.
No, I think is it like 1 in 5?
Yeah,
I think it might be slightly less than that. More, yeah, especially in primary school, but we're talking about high school, I suppose. But yeah, I didn't notice that thing about the teacher. Oh, I thought all Mr. So and So does is just shows a video, which that's what Storm was doing, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's quite funny.
Which says a lot. But yeah, I can't remember where I was going with that, other than schools being under resourced and not being able to like facilitate and hold the sorts of conversations that would likely needed to be had should children be shown this. But
yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe it'd be fine for parents to do it, but not like a teacher with 30, 40 kids. That's a lot, I think. Not only is it a lot for the teacher, but then you also risk having kids in the room who are just completely like belittled or like not listened to or whatever else it might be, like silenced for some of their views on it. Like I remember what school was like, and you've got to toe the line, haven't you? If you've got a slightly heretical view, you're not gonna get away with it.
Yeah, I remember saying things in lesson that I thought were like fairly reasonable, and I was hammered down a couple of times. Like, I'm trying to think. There was one time in humanities where, which kind of like religious education, where I think I mentioned the fact that it seemed like a lot of like terrorists were related to or were following religion, or like or had a religious belief. And that in my mind at the time, bearing in mind I was like probably 13, 14, similar sort of age to Jamie in adolescence. And one of the head teachers or the school heads was called to the class because I was apparently I was saying that all religious people were terrorists, which wasn't what I was saying at all. I was just saying there's a relation between terrorism and religion, because obviously there's always that conflict perhaps between different religions, and having these strong extremist beliefs, which I didn't understand at the time. I was just drawing a parallel, like, oh, this is something that I've noticed. But
if you look at a list of the 50 most active terrorist groups in the world, I think 2 are secular.
Really?
Yeah. So I think you make a fair point.
Yeah, I thought I was making a fair point at the time, but apparently not. But that just shows, how in some circumstances teachers aren't able to hold that space for those sorts of ideas. And then, as an alternative to that, there's times where teachers have given me all the time in the world and have been brilliant and have really cared about, my thoughts and all that sort of thing. But
like what
okay
happens, then. Just like what happens if you like say in class that, oh, actually I kind of feel a bit for Jamie, and then you get a pile-on of 30 other kids just like going for you. What does the teacher do? Don't know.
Well, this is played out on LinkedIn for me. I posted about how I didn't think that the show was particularly helpful in the way that it's been positioned, and I certainly don't think it would be beneficial to show it in front of schools because of some of the reasons and conversation we're having now. And there's been, to be fair, probably 90% supportive of that narrative. But then there have been some people that have very much disagreed with me and have come in with terms like toxic masculinity and how this is a boy problem, not a female problem. And like you can just, these are supposed to be adults in the room having a debate, and we struggle with that, let alone with children and adults. So
exactly.
It shows how difficult these conversations are to have.
And that's on social media as well, which in some regards will make it worse, but also some make it easier because you're having an emotional reaction to this, but there's a filter, isn't there? You've still got to type it out and press send, by which point you may have calmed down a bit. It's not just like completely off the cuff.
What did you we touched on it briefly, but that's I think it was like the 3rd episode maybe, where he's in the room with the psychiatrist. What's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist?
So I think she was a forensic psychologist, not a psychiatrist, and a psychiatrist is like medically trained. They're a doctor, and then they specialize in psychiatry. And a forensic psychologist they have a psychology degree, I suppose, at least.
Yeah.
Which is just like a 3-year BSc type thing.
Right. Thanks for clearing that up.
You're welcome.
Yeah. What did you think of that scene? Because he had quite a few like explosive moments, and I don't know.
I thought it was quite weird. It felt a little bit like, again, drama, not documentary, but it felt a little bit like in real life, if I was Jamie's dad, I'd be like, can we have a male psychologist do this, please? Because it felt like the episode was kind of like, it was about her in quite a big way. How does this affect the psychologist? How does Jamie and what he's doing affect her? How does he relate to her? So I guess from that perspective, it's good, from the show. But in real life, I'd probably rather have like a male psychologist because they'll be able to relate to Jamie more. Like, Jamie, do you have any female friends? Like, I just wouldn't ask that. Like, not many boys do at 13 have female friends, I don't think. And then I wonder if there's the fact that she's female also is embarrassing for him, because it's almost like the same. I wonder if he feels like he's being bullied by her in a way that Katie was bullying him. Like, have you had any sexual experiences? And he's almost shamed into lying about that.
Interesting. I didn't think about that at all, which I guess puts an emphasis again on how important male role models are for situations like that, but like more broadly as well.
Yeah,
and how they react differently.
Avoiding getting into situations like that.
That's so interesting. I noticed as well when she said that she was leaving as well, and the kind of panic that he had, that I don't know if he had felt like he'd built a relationship with her, and that was being taken away from him.
Yeah.
And the panic that came from that.
And then the anger as well, that he potentially felt like he'd been manipulated, maybe.
Yeah. And then I guess that poses the question of, I know this is just a drama, so we're like just hypothesizing, but say that somebody was in that situation, like if he had a male role model at that time, and that continued rather than her having to leave or whatever, how much of a positive impact that would have on him? Like, is there the resources in place for him to have those male role models moving forward or whatever?
Do you mean in like in prison sort of thing?
Yeah, like I don't know how that works. It kind of, to me, like the response the emotional response I had to that was like, oh, he's on his own again, like, and he was on his own before.
Yeah, being dragged away by the security guard.
Yeah.
That was quite. Yeah, that was quite. Yeah, that was quite an emotionally charged moment for me as well. Actually, I don't really know why.
Yeah, I guess you could probably draw a lot of parallels between the clients you see, perhaps, and the relationships you build, maybe, and for that just to be taken away, it's quite a lot.
Yeah. I mean, with that, this is completely. I think it's quite different. I think, but with clients as well, I don't have any. If they want to leave, they want to leave. That's fine. But I actually had one leaving yesterday, but it felt like good. I mean, it was great. It's like he came with a specific problem. We sorted it, and that was fine, and it was great. Like, it was. I had this kind of. I felt like a proud dad. It was really weird. Yeah.
No, so that's cool.
That's a bit. I guess it's a little bit different, but yeah. It's still maybe.
How long had you been seeing that client for?
Since September.
Okay.
So what, 6-7 months?
Yeah, a decent amount of time then. I can remember, had a similar sort of experience so I had a therapist for a year in total. saw him every week, every Tuesday, as you know. And yeah, it was almost like a ceremonial thing when we left. So we kind of knew that I was going to be traveling from this date. So we'd be working with each other up to this point, although we didn't know that I was going to be traveling when we started, or like making the decision to kind of move away and travel.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a similar experience where we kind of recapped on everything that I kind of learned about myself, and yeah, left feeling quite excited about it. I was like going into a new chapter, and but also knowing as well that it's not going to be the last time that I have therapy. You know, this is just a period of time where I'm going to go and explore, having built these new tools, and kind of see what I can do with those, and then come back again at some point.
What I was thinking about yesterday as a response to this client leaving was, you know, you can go as far down that rabbit hole as you want. Like my tutor always used to say, like, the work's never done. So I don't know, how old is she? She's nearly 70. And she's been doing this work for 40 years, and she's still like, I still learn new stuff about myself all the time. So at what point do you stop? You can just keep going until the cows come home. But if you've got a specific problem, and I don't mean like, I can't find a job, I can't hold a job down. It's what issue do you have in your personality, if you like, which is stopping you from holding down a job? That's the problem, not the fact that you can't hold a job down. That's the problem. So do you stop after you've sorted that out, or do you just keep going further down the rabbit hole? I would say it's probably best to, people come to therapy as a way to live their life better, don't they? So do the thing you want to do, and then go off and just, you know, do what you want. And then when you encounter another problem, you come back.
Yeah, you need that time to do you go like integration? Is that the right?
Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like there's a time where you're understanding a lot, and then you're like understanding and learning, then you actually integrate it into your life. And sometimes it's hard to do that when you're still learning and like understanding all this stuff about yourself. You can probably miss things by not integrating them. But yeah, anyway, that's my experience with it. There was another comment as well that I had on the post that I put on LinkedIn that I wanted to chat to you about, that I had like kind of this response to. And it was this one lady, obviously won't name her name, but she spoke about how the show has done a good job, or people need to understand more, and the show has done a good job in showing that women are terrified by men, because of, and using terms like toxic masculinity and all that sort of thing. And when I saw that, I was like,
classic projection. Classic.
Okay, this is what I thought, because I've seen you writing about this like quite a lot on LinkedIn, and I didn't know how to respond to it, because my initial reaction was like, one, I obviously don't want to be put in that group of people, i.e. men, where therefore I am thought of as being like feared by women, or I'm walking down the street and, you know, women are terrified by me and all that sort of thing. So that was the first response I had, where I was like, well, I don't want to be put into that group. I'm not saying, you know, whether or not I should be put into that group, whether it's right or wrong that she's saying these things, but that was my initial thought. Then I saw like the term toxic masculinity, which I've kind of come to the understanding that I don't think it's a particularly useful term, but it would be helpful if you could kind of go into that a little bit more, because I know you've got some thoughts on that as well.
I don't really know that.
Sorry?
There's loads to even kind of go from with that, so to start.
And so I was thinking about how to respond to it, and I responded in a way that I think was I was probably treading the line a little bit too much. I was being very diplomatic and whatnot. And then this lady ended up coming back with a lot of personal experiences and all this sort of thing. I thought, okay, this isn't something that, one, really is related to the original topic, and two, I don't need to comment back on your personal experiences, because that's your personal experiences, and I don't know how helpful it is debating based off of those, because that's the experience she's had, and that's what she's choosing to relate her entire thought process and
view of
ideology
men,
or whatever to. Yeah,
how
exactly.
she views men in general.
Yeah.
So,
but my understanding is she's probably not the only one. Well, I know she's not the only one that I've heard saying women are terrified by men, women are this, men are this, blah, blah, blah. And I just wonder if you had any thoughts on how, if there's a better way to like approach those conversations.
So the reality is, all men aren't X and all women aren't Y. Obviously, that's called splitting. So all men are bad or all good. I mean, it's clearly not true. So, I think I posted about this yesterday. Actually, we're talking about LinkedIn stuff, but in the 80s, a guy called Christopher Latch called that decade the decade of narcissism. Basically, just like individualism and all that stuff. But Jonathan Shedler, who we mentioned last time, has called this decade, or noticed that the two most common psychological defenses people use in conjunction together with each other, is projection and splitting. So this person saying all women are terrified of men, and it's done a really good job of portraying that. What she's saying is, I'm scared of men because I've had a bad experience in the past, which is exactly what she's gone on to say in the comment. And like, I suppose from like a mythological, like archetypal way of looking at it, men, or masculinity, if you like, it's either wise king or terrible father. So if someone has a bad experience with a man, it is the bad pole of this archetype. And then you just throw the baby out with the bathwater, so you don't get the good side either. And it would be naive for me to sit here and say that male energy, masculinity is just, it's like safe in inverted commas, because it's not really, is it? I mean, bad things happen all the time. Men do bad things all the time. But by just calling masculinity toxic, again, it misses the point. And the masculine energy is potentially destructive unless it's sublimated, I'm not sure if that's the right word, into something useful and protective, I suppose. So I think that's kind of what people miss, and that's what this society and this culture doesn't have, which most other societies and cultures have had in the past, and actually most of them still do, which is like an initiation ceremony. So the boy is a boy, and then it reaches puberty, and then it's got all of this energy. Like, I'm seeing this now with my dog. Like, he's just suddenly getting shitloads of testosterone. Like, he's perfectly well behaved and really well trained and all that stuff, and now he's got this testosterone. He's just fucking full of it. This happens with boys and young men. They have the same sort of thing. So then they are basically boys in men's body. So what do you do with all this energy and all this power, I suppose, and all this strength? You can channel it into something useful and good, or it's destructive. So the role of, like we were talking about role models before, but this is more like a mentor type thing, or an elder. The role of those sorts of men in the society is to help these boys become men, which we don't really have that anymore, because people have bad experiences with men. The whole thing gets demonized. Masculinity is bad, it's dangerous, etc., etc. So what we need to do, instead of encouraging boys to become men, we try to convince them to become women. We neuter them, basically.
I saw a conversation today, I think it was probably the Chris Williamson conversation, where they were talking about how we're trying to expand the spectrum of what it means to be masculine, so much so that it encompasses everything, and so like therefore it's almost nothing in a way.
Yeah.
Which I guess is what you're saying there, where it's like we don't have that. We don't have the channeling of that masculine energy anymore. So it's like, we don't know what to do. So we'll just open that spectrum, and therefore masculinity is everything, and we're all the same. And then when you have men acting in a way that shows these more traditionally masculine behaviors, whatever, then we panic because we're like, oh shit, that's not our idea of masculinity.
You see someone being assertive and you're like, oh, that guy's being aggressive, when he's not. Yeah. And it's, you see one thing through your own lens, even though that's not actually what's happening.
Yeah. The channeling of masculine energy reminds me again of a Jordan Peterson part that I've seen, where he talks about, I think the phrase he uses, which obviously isn't his own, but it's like, it's better to be a what is it? Better to be a warrior in a
garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah, which essentially is saying you have channeled that warrior energy, and it's there and can be used when it's needed, but you've channeled it in a way that you're able to you're able to be in a garden in a way that isn't what am I trying to say? I'm trying to like draw a parallel between the garden and society, where it's like men should be able to be aggressive because there are points where perhaps they will need to be. Men should be able to, act in this certain masculine way, but like when you've truly kind of channeled that energy, it allows you to also integrate into society in a way where you're not aggressive when you don't need to be aggressive.
Yeah. You have
if
your
you
sword,
can unfumble what I've just said, that would be great.
Yeah. So you have a sword, you have the potential for violence, but you choose not to use it. So this is I'm getting this secondhand from Jordan Peterson, but it's originally from Nietzsche, which was if, again, paraphrased, if you can't say no, then it's not morality, it's cowardice. So
can you explain that? Say the phrase again.
Can't say no, then most of your morality is cowardice. So Nietzsche said that most of what we call morality is cowardice. So what he meant by that was, do I tolerate this thing or this person doing this one thing to me? Yes, because I'm a good person. Or is it rather, yes, because I can't say no? Am I actually just a pushover, or am I being moral?
I see. So it's like you're making the conscious decision to say yes because that's going to have the better outcome, rather than having no option but say yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can say no. You know you can say no, and you can back it up.
So does that relate to when people perhaps have an opinion on something? I'm thinking like virtue signaling almost. Is there a parallel there with that, where they say something in order to portray themselves in a certain way or to be with a certain group because they have to say it that way, but not because that's what they truly think?
Maybe to a degree, yeah, but I think that's also maybe that's downstream of it, because then what you're doing, your virtue signaling, is you're giving yourself status as a virtuous person, even though you've not actually done anything to claim it. You're just saying it.
There's some of that involved with this area that we're speaking about, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's quite easy to demonize people, isn't it? And you can get points for that. I had a really interesting, this is again another LinkedIn thing. I had a really interesting conversation, let's call it, the other day with a woman, and it was some guy had posted this cut out from a job advert, and it was we need someone with OCD like level of attention to detail. And I looked at the comments, and it was just like people just, you know, you can just imagine it. Oh my God, this is just so offensive, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, am I the only one to find this funny? And I said it knowing full well it's quite inflammatory, let's say.
Yeah.
Like to be a little bit contrarian sometimes. But some woman just piped up saying, "Oh, worrying." Yeah, what was it? Oh, that's worrying considering you're a psychotherapist. And I was just like, oh, fuck's sake, here we go. And then, and she was like, how dare you like mock the lived experience of people with OCD and laugh at OCD. I was like, I didn't do any of that. This is funny because of how like out of touch this is. Like it's funny from an absurd kind of perspective, isn't it? Like you just don't see that sort of thing anymore. It really stands out. Hence why this guy had posted it, which is why I thought it's funny.
Yeah.
And then this woman was just completely ignoring me when I was saying, this is, that's not what I'm saying at all. Until in the end, I was just like, listen, we need to leave it there because this is getting out. And she was like, oh, you say you're a psychotherapist. What are your credentials? Where did you train? What qualification do you have? And I was just like, that's completely irrelevant to this conversation.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Have a nice day. And then there's one like last little like attempt to reclaim power and control of the situation. She was just like, well, your repeated evasion of my question tells its own story. I was just like, so annoying. And it's
an
like
effective way to have a conversation, is it? What were like, did you have any positive responses to that post that you actually feel like you got something from?
So this was a comment on somebody else's, but like one, probably the most demoralizing thing about that was people were just like liking her comments, and I'm just like, how can you not see what's happening here? From like, I actually made a post by it again, like a few days afterwards, about like what was happening from like a psychological perspective, and I was just like, what I'm doing here is intellectualizing, rationalization, and using humor as a defense mechanism. Because I posted this, I thought this was a really good way to make the point, because I was saying what you're doing here is you're telling people what they should be offended by. And I think that's belittling and infantilizing to people. And that's kind of what she wasn't listening to and what she took issue with. So I posted this YouTube video. Have you ever seen this, when parents are carrying the baby and they pretend to back its head on the wall, but they knock it and then like, oh my God, and then they start crying.
Yeah.
I posted that video saying that's what you're doing to people. Which I thought A, made the point quite nicely, and B, was really funny.
But given her previous response, I'm guessing she didn't find that very funny.
She didn't find it funny, no. But she was like, I am not only am I bad, I'm dangerous. I'm all of these different things. So she was splitting, projecting, all the rest of it. And the reason why I cut the conversation short was because I don't trust this person not to just take this way out of hand and go to like some sort of regulatory body and make complaints and all that stuff. So I was like, this is it. We're done.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question. In hindsight, because I've been thinking about this, like comments to respond to and what not to respond to, and even parts of things to acknowledge and not acknowledge, because I think people often in a response or whatever it is, even when you're having a conversation or a debate with somebody, they'll put in something that they know that you'll bite, and then they can use that as like a bit of ammunition or whatever. So I've been thinking like, oh, what do I actually respond to and what's helpful? In hindsight, would you have just not spoken to or had any dialogue with that lady at all?
No, I don't know. I don't regret doing it actually, because I don't know. I kind of feel as though I learned quite a bit from it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't regret it. It was interesting at the
No.
very least. It was interesting. And
Yeah.
I just saw what can happen, and
Mm.
and as a result afterwards, I was just like thinking about what did she do, again from a psychological perspective, that would indicate what. So like one of that last comment, which was really ambiguous, but insinuating that I'm dangerous or not actually qualified or anything like that, is like a really classic move of someone with borderline personality disorder. So I didn't know that beforehand, but I should probably disclaimer, I don't think she's got borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
But that is the thing which people with borderline personality disorder do. So I learned that as a result of this exchange, as well as all the rest of it, like what can actually happen with like internet pylons, which wasn't a pylon, but it could very well have escalated that way.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So it was educational,
Well.
at least. I also this kind of brings it back to the conversation a little bit, and I kind of also thought about this from like a perspective of different ways of interacting with the world and with people and with clients and whatever else. And the way she's doing it is not, she's like mollycoddling, I think, from my perspective, and it's not necessarily wrong, but it's a very feminine way of doing it. And the way I was approaching it was more of like a masculine way. Like, no, I have agency. I decide what I'm pissed off with, not you. What I'm offended by, not you. Don't try and wrap me up in cotton wool and all that stuff. And I think that is one of the core issues which is facing people now, really. Men now, I should say.
Well, you saw it in Adolescence, I think, as well, where you had when Katie's friend was talking to, I think she was a teacher, or she was like a well-being officer, perhaps, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
But the woman was, I felt like she was like mothering her, and I thought that was actually quite effective at that point. She almost got the Katie's friend to open up and be comfortable with her. And then you saw the way, I'm trying to think of an example, even the way that the the detective was talking to Jamie, it was much more assertive. It was much more like, you're in this situation, you need to think about it like this, else this is going to happen. And I think that probably Jamie reacted quite well to that, perhaps. And there must be a reason as well why Jamie chose to have his dad as the person that would be there to support him through the trial and whatnot, rather than his mother, maybe, because he didn't want that mother. Sometimes it's nice to have the comfort and the mothering and all that sort of thing, but in a situation where you're
probably feel safer with his dad.
Yeah, right. If there's a situation where you want to be, protected, or I don't know, it just felt like those two were quite aligned.
Yeah, I think that really points to a thing as well, which is what kind of back a few minutes, what we were talking about before in terms of masculine energy and where it goes. That's a healthy avenue for it to go down. You have a family, you provide for them, you protect them. And obviously Jamie felt that, otherwise he wouldn't have had his dad in there. He felt protected by it. Like he's like a container for all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, the parents were talking about at the end, I think it was episode 4, whether they could have done anything differently and whether or not it was their fault. I thought that was quite interesting too.
One thing, just before we go to that, which has just come to me then, is that scene in the cell at the end of the first episode, just after they watched the video. Is that the first time, the video of the stabbing?
Yeah, okay, so the dad has just realised that his son has committed this crime.
Yeah. They're in the interview room, not the cell. Yeah, so his dad's acting as like a container for Jamie's like feelings and emotions and all of that stuff. But then they show him the CCTV. It's obvious Jamie's done it. His dad breaks down, is that then the first time we see, like, other than the first scene where Jamie's shit scared, is that the first time we see him like really see and feel the like gravity of the situation? Because his dad's broken down. He's not acting as the container for Jamie's emotions anymore. He's not holding it for him. So Jamie's got to hold it for himself. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that makes much sense.
I think so. I'm not quite sure the point that you're making with that. I understand that that's definitely the point at which, yeah, Jamie's almost on his own to try and contain his own emotions because his dad's not there to do it. But yeah, I don't quite understand what effect that then has moving forward.
So that the point I was trying to make with that is the channeling of the masculine energy in a positive way, and what happens if there is none of that, or it breaks down or something like that. Because if you're a 13-year-old boy and you're left with all of these feelings, what do you do? You're not going to do anything like sensible with it, are you?
Yeah, there was a similar situation at the end, the last episode, I think it was, where when Jamie said that he's going to plead guilty, and his dad couldn't say anything and kind of broke down again. But I think the mother then stepped in at that point and almost held the space there. So I guess maybe the answer is to have multiple or as many people around you that can show up in different ways that perhaps others can't. And again, that probably plays into the fact where there's times where more masculine and more feminine figures can show up in those areas more than the other.
Yeah. And I think from like a broader like lifetime sort of perspective, that'll be different throughout a lifespan, where you'll need one parent more than the other. And vice versa.
Or maybe, and this is an interesting one, where you get to an age where you start holding your parents' emotions, perhaps, when that switches.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm laughing at that is because for some people that starts when they're like 10. If they've got like an emotionally volatile parent, which mine was, my mum was, not my dad. So that's the sort of thing which can happen at any time.
Yeah. Hopefully as late into childhood and that developmental stage and the time when you're trying to have all these exploration of experiences and identity and all these sorts of things, hopefully as late into that stage as possible, because I think it holds back quite a lot of that development. You'll be able to say more to that than I can, but
I mean, from that perspective, I think this is what happened to me. I just completely forgot really about what I needed at the time and anything really. My sole focus was mum needs to not be pissed off. Everything needs to be calm, and I'll do what I can to ensure that happens.
Yeah. Can't add any fuel to the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Try and stamp it out instead.
Yeah. Instead of pouring fuel on it. Which started to happen when I got to 16. I was pissed off with it all. So.
Is that when you rebelled slightly?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
About time.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to rebel at some point.
Exactly.
Okay, so I guess to like try and wrap it all up and piece it all together then, which I'm going to do a terrible job of doing. How do we piece this together? I just want to like wrap it all up and then essentially ask the question, is there a more effective way to deal with this?
Okay. I wonder if two points which aren't necessarily fully fleshed out then. Would we say that we're going to come back to feminism, I think. So there's this idea, I didn't come up with this, it's called the Longhouse, which is basically, actually I posted about this today, it's basically like, comes from Scandinavia somewhere, and it's this area, I suppose, which is dominated by the grandmother or some sort. It's basically just like feminine, right? So the culture in which we live, I think, as a result of modern feminism, is now a feminine place to be. So kind of bringing back in this lady who said, you know, women are scared of men.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of fits in with that, I think. And there's a new taboo, and people are called toxically masculine or whatever it might be. And I wonder if that is partially because unapologetic male power, if you like, is like a new taboo. So if you're unapologetically just like a man, right, you're assertive, whatever it might be, but actually you're viewed as aggressive. Is that like a new taboo? It's not really, doesn't really have place in this society, which is inherently feminine, in the longhouse, if you like.
Interesting question. Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing that play out. That's the lack of understanding of what role men have to play, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
what you've just described there is the former role of the man, those more masculine traits, and like you say, when they're being performed now, they're being viewed negatively.
Yeah, so it's the male energy, masculine energy, kind of, it is powerful. So a lot of people view that as dangerous, some of them with good reason. But if it's channeled and sublimated into something which is good, then it's protective and curative as opposed to destructive. So
we have to work out how, going back to like channeling the masculine energy, essentially we need like a new framework to channel that masculine energy. Because
go on, finish off.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just because not obviously, but society has changed, and so the way in which we need to channel that masculine energy is different to how we've previously done it. It's just working out how that's done now and what's acceptable.
So this kind of moves into something else a little bit, I think, but I think it's also relevant. So I was chatting to someone yesterday, again on LinkedIn, and it was about like betraying yourself. So
portraying or betraying?
Betraying, like lying to yourself.
Betraying. Yeah.
And just kind of, and as a result, what comes from that is like a projection or who you want to be, what you want to be seen as, and all that stuff. But it's not actually you. So the film American Psycho, this guy sent me a YouTube link to like his morning routine, and it reminded me of this guy called Ashton Hall or something like that. Have you seen him?
No.
I'd never heard of him my entire life, and I just saw this fucking video on like Twitter, and it's his morning routine. It got like 100 million views or something ridiculous. I was like, why did that resonate so much? And this guy just comes across as a fucking psychopathic narcissist. It's bizarre. Yeah. But this guy's point was, we've gone from moral character, from like Dickensian time sort of thing. You know, all Dickens characters have like a character about them, they're flawed, etc., etc. They're allowed to have flaws. And then we've gone from that to being a personality, like in like a media famous or sort of thing. So now it's like people are a brand, and it's polished, and this is who I am, and just ignore that bit. This is this bit here. That's who I am. And I wonder if people have then hidden parts of themselves. Like if you're a man, you're going to hide the parts of yourself which aren't accepted in culture, which would be the powerful side of themselves, I suppose. The bit which people are afraid of. And I wonder then if this show is a way, maybe not consciously, to be fair, but as a way to kind of like keep that in the box. So I remember seeing a headline after this came out saying, "Is your son a ticking time bomb?" And it's like,
probably not.
Probably not, exactly, yeah. But yeah, people are now afraid of that, aren't they? So any signs that your son could be portraying toxic characteristics, you're going to try and address it early. But then you also rob your son and the world of anything useful they might do. So the answer to that would be initiation, mentors, role models to an extent, but to a lesser one, I think, but initiation and mentors.
Yeah, I just had like a big realization of what a shit show all that was. Yeah, just thinking about what the solutions are. But like you said, it's role models, continuing to have conversations like these that kind of like keep that, like the spectrum more broad, I guess, more acceptable.
And when we talk about role models as well, whether we like it or not, Andrew Tate is a role model to people. So the characters and the people which boys are attracted to is also influenced by culture. So what do you address first?
Yeah.
And
You
maybe
can see
this
it,
show
can't
is...
you?
Go on.
I'm picturing like this. I'm picturing two boxes where you've got this box which is like the acceptable narrative, and you've got all these these beliefs and opinions and of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to be a man, for example. And you've got all these people that sit inside that box, or like are just on the edges of it or whatever, and like are kind of keeping in line with it. And then you've got these people that just fall outside of that box, who either like rebel, aren't prepared to keep to that narrative or whatever. And then outside of that box is this kind of dangerous area where you've got the likes of Andrew Tate, which some people are going to just go straight into that box because that's like very shiny and flashy and cars and women and money and all that sort of thing. And then you've got hope perhaps that there are some more positive areas, like some boxes that people can fall into. But unless you've got those other areas, like there's nowhere else for them to go.
Okay, maybe this would be quite a good place to like finish it off with then. So in this manosphere thing, which is so vague, like I don't even know what even, it's just too vague. So Andrew Tate will be a part of it, I suppose. But then so will people like Robert Bly, who was part of the mythopoetic movement in the 90s. Yeah, in the 90s. He wrote poetry, he held like men's groups and stuff like that in forests with fucking drums and whatever else. He wrote books. He's written... Where is it? Iron John. That's one of my favorite ones. Basically, just dissecting one of the grim fairy tales from fucking hundreds and hundreds of years ago about what it means to be a man and go through initiation and things like that. So he's a part of it, and so is Andrew Tate. So you're not going to find Robert Bly by accident, though. You almost need to be pointed in that direction.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just it's opening up. Yeah, it's just keeping the conversation open and pointing people in the right direction.
Yeah,
having role models that are doing that,
and not like
food for thought there.
Shaming boys for being male, basically.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a shame, isn't it? Well, I don't want to end it on a bad note because I know you've got to go in
a
couple of minutes, but
yeah,
I feel like we've hit on like a real point there, which I think is good because it's kind of summarized the situation that we're at, like with young boys and men at the moment. The conversations around that. So
we can potentially do the next one from there. So we've kind of set out, it is finished on like a bit of a downer, but that doesn't mean to say we're finished on it.
Yeah, exactly. No, we'll pick it up from there, definitely. I think it's a good point, good place to end, because obviously we're not going to be able to answer that question in 1 minute. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty poignant place to land.
Indeed.
All right. Mate, that was cool. That was interesting.
I enjoyed that. Yeah,
sparked lots of thoughts.
it was good. I enjoyed that one.
Awesome. All right, mate.
All right.
Well, you've got to go, but thanks so much for that. Oh, mate, good to catch up with you as well.
Likewise.
Yeah, hopefully I'll give you a shout, but maybe we can do one next week or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds. I mean, it's fine. Sounds good to me.